Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hey everybody, welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morgan. Today I have an unbelievable guest. He's a personal friend of mine, which I am honored to say, Whiz Buckley. I'm going to read his bio. Ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you this is a bio, if I fabricated my own bio, it could not sound as good as the one I'm about to read you. Whiz, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man. I love you. You putting the ladder down, man. You're being the change you want to see in the world, and I love to see it.
Absolutely. And you are definitely a role model for that change. And let me read this bio. Whiz is an internationally recognized motivational and keynote speaker who has worked with companies and organizations ranging from the Fortune 500 to NFL teams to small businesses to improve their performance and execution. He is one of the only speakers in the world with extensive military and business experience. He is a decorated Navy Top Gun F-18 Horner fighter pilot who went on, who went from the front lines to the front office. He flew fighters for 15 years, deploying on board USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Kitty Hawk in support of Operation Southern Watch. He was a C-level executive of a multi-billion-dollar trading firm headquartered in the Chicago Board of Trade and created a $25 million media company startup in under a year at the age of 38. He also founded a highly successful financial trading company. Whiz is the founder and president of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, the 501c3 dedicated to saving and changing the lives of our nation's heroes, which includes veterans, first responders, and their families with psychedelic-assisted therapy. He is an international best-selling author of 3 books, the first From Sea Level, SEA, to the letter C level, a Navy fighter pilot's journey from the front lines to the front office. Second, Strength and Gratitude. And third, but certainly not last, COVID Crash, From Panic to Profit. Whiz is the executive producer of No Fallen Heroes Extraction, a docuseries following Whiz and his mission to try and end or reduce the national tragedy of veteran suicide. He hosts the Max Afterburner podcast, a free-form podcast ranked in the top 2.5% of podcasts in the entire world. Wiz is the only motivational and keynote speaker in the world who can fulfill a once-in-a-lifetime dream of taking you flying in his own L-39C Albatross fighter jet. Wiz can also provide 2 fighter jets for the ultimate 1 versus 1 Top Gun dogfight experience. Unbelievable. Again, welcome to the show. It is just incredible what you've achieved in your life. And I'm not pandering to my guests. It is truly incredible what you've done with your life.
I appreciate it, bro. It's sitting there listening to that. I'm like, man, I'm robbing a village somewhere of an idiot. I just, poor kid from South Jersey. I have no idea how any of that happened, but that's a lot of good. It wasn't all sunshine and lollipops, obviously. And that's why you and I are talking.
Exactly. And life never is. So the point of my podcast is to touch people who are going through it, first responders, vets, anyone. But you see the man before you right now. He was not always this man. He's fallen. He's gotten back up. He's risen to the pinnacle. And we're going to go through a story because I want to inspire others. I want to give others hope. And in speaking to these guests that I have, that's exactly what you guys should take from these podcasts. And, again, Wiz, there's not too much more I can say about Wiz and what he's doing. So, Wiz, please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you hail from.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm born and raised in South Jersey. Most of my family's from South Philadelphia. My mom and dad were, born and raised around South Philly, and my brother and 3 older sisters were born in South Philly. And then my mom and dad hopped on the Atlantic City Expressway and drove down to Margate, New Jersey. My little sister and I were born down there. So, lower middle class Irish Catholic family, stereotypical, I was an altar boy, little coat and tie and Catholic school and all that stuff. And, I was always taught service above self. My parents were kind of like John F. Kennedy Democrats and, give back to your country and all that type of stuff. And they didn't have too much money. So it was like, hey, maybe the military could help pay for college too, as well. But, kind of a normal childhood up until just an absolute horrific tragedy struck. My brother and my two sisters were going to Villanova. And my sister Monica was a freshman. She had just gotten to Villanova, and the three of them were at a fraternity party, and my brother and sister Marilyn said, hey, we're heading back to campus. Monica, do you want to ride? And she said, well, I'm going to get a ride with these folks. And it's the last time they, she got in a car and drunk driver and thrown from the car and broke her neck. She was 19, so she was killed. And that was just an absolute hand grenade in our family. I mean, she was the middle child. Technically, she was kind of the glue that held us together, and that was just an absolute horror. So not only did I lose my sister that day, I lost my parents.
Right.
My dad checked out. Years later in life, when I had kids, I remember watching my two boys playing, beating the shit out of each other. My dad and I just, sitting there on the couch. I looked at him, and he knew what I was saying, obviously, because I looked at him. I said, Dad, how did you do it? And he said, Matthew, when they lowered her in the ground, I wanted to jump in there with her. But I had you. He had to persevere. It was brutal. It was tough. Also suffered some sexual issues when I was a child. So childhood wasn't all sunshine and lollipops. And, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
I turned that down. I got into
Yeah.
Chaminade High School. My parents like, you want to go? I'm like, no, there's no way I'm going. I heard they had a hot tub too. That was the rumor at the time. Not true, but I'm like, there's no way I'm going to an all boys high school. Thank you.
No, yeah. I mean, we had an all-girls high school, Our
Yep.
Lady of Mercy Academy down the road, but it was like an 80s movie, right? The boys and
Yeah, exactly.
But so I played sports, throughout high school, and I'd miss the bus in the afternoon, and my dad, would pick me up, and in between St. Augustine Prep and our home was the cemetery, and that man stopped every day, and he got out of the car every day,
Really?
and he cried. So it was a very tough, experience. Grew up, with my dad. We'd watch, war movies. I'd watch like Midway and, the Flying Leathernecks and the Bridges at Toko Ri, for example. And I was always, living on the Jersey Shore. I was a beach kid. I loved the ocean and, the military. And then I just was enthralled with aviation from just a young age, just totally enthralled with that. So kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup, aviation and Navy and ocean. I said, you know what? I want to be a Navy fighter pilot. And growing up, the kid across the street who I was best friends with, his dad flew fighter jets out of Atlantic City International. He flew for the New Jersey Air National Guard. And this was, I'm going to date myself, but this was the 80s, Cold War, where the Soviet bombers would be off the coast and they'd like drift into our airspace and time how quick it would, take to be intercepted and all that stuff. And he was larger than life. This guy was, drove a Trans Am and he flew for Eastern too. So he was an airline pilot and a fighter pilot in the Guard. I'm like, man, I want to do that. So
Yeah.
ended up, I wasn't smart enough to go to the academy. So I was Navy ROTC down in Jacksonville, Florida. I broke the mold. Everybody went to Villanova in my family and all the Northeast schools. I'm like, you can keep it, man. I'm going warm. So
Smart guy. You didn't see that back then. You didn't see a lot of northern kids going to southern schools like you do now. Now
exactly.
it's more than acceptable. I mean, it's common.
Exactly. Yeah. I love the Northeast. I love, if I'm back in Jersey for more than 5 minutes, I get my accent back. I'm eating my cheesesteaks. I'm on the boardwalk and all that stuff. But escaped to Florida. I met my beautiful bride, Susie, at Jacksonville University. And it was interesting because junior in high school, unfortunately or fortunately, the movie Top Gun came out. I'm like,
Yep.
son of a bitch. I'm like, I wanted to do this since my earliest memories. And now in 1986, everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot. So when I was in ROTC in college, I had to, you had to bust your ass because everybody wanted to fly. But I listened to a buddy of mine who had gone before me, and thank God I did, or my life would have changed because, I went to ROTC and they're like, if you want to be a fighter pilot, you have to be an engineer. You got to be a, aerospace engineer or mechanical engineer or something like 500-pound brainish.
Right.
And my buddy who had gone before me, he's like, dude, it's a lie. Don't listen to them. It's GPA, man. Like the vast majority of what you select is going to be based on your grade point average. He's like, I was a forestry major. So I went poli-sci, skate on by, get to fly, right? So I partied my ass off in college. I partied my ass off in college, and a bunch of my fraternity brothers who listened to the Navy and went engineering, they were miserable for 4 years. They're locked in their room studying, and I'm out drinking at nickel beer night, and they're getting like 2 O's or 2 5s, barely skating by.
Yep.
And I got, I crushed it, and I got aviation, and they ended up being boat drivers. So
unbelievable.
Early lesson in my life: don't listen to the government. So I got commissioned in the early '90s, and was sent to flight school in Pensacola, the cradle of naval aviation, and everything in the military, or as you know, being a police officer, it's kind of a pyramid, man. Everybody kind of enters here, and you gotta keep striving to get to that next level, to the top of the pyramid, because in Pensacola Naval Aviation, where all baby naval aviators start, the Navy's got a lot of helicopters, man.
Yeah.
They have a lot of fixed wing, propeller planes, and then they got a lot of jets too. So you got to bust your ass. So I remember I was the Unabomber in flight school, man. I got a 1-bedroom house like a mile away from the air station in the middle of the woods, and I just locked myself in that place and studied my ass off, man. If I was not going to get what I wanted, to fly fighter jets, it wasn't going to be because of something I could have controlled.
Yeah.
I remember hearing horror stories in flight school, like, holy shit, did you hear what happened last week? Everybody got sent to helicopters, needs of the Navy, except the number one guy. The number one guy in every class gets to, I'm like, be the number one guy in every class. So selected jets, and then I jumped in
And
my
what,
car.
you're the number one guy?
Was the number one guy, and then
Nice.
selected jets. I jumped in my Ensign Mobile with my golden retriever and drove to Kingsville, Texas, which is outside of Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi was a metropolis compared to Kingsville, Texas.
I can imagine.
And then the next level of the pyramid, at the time, the Navy has a lot of jets. They have anti-submarine jets. They have jammers. They have refueling jets. They have the F-14 Tomcat from Top Gun was still big. And then they had the brand new jet, the F-18 Hornet. And once again, I'm like, I don't want to fly an anti-submarine plane or a jammer. I want the best of the best, and that was the Hornet. So I selected F-18s out of Kingsville, and they sent me out to the West Coast out in California. So I think the furthest west I had ever been in my life was Texas. And I drove out to the land of fruits and nuts in California, and that's where I did most of my F-18 flying.
And then what years are we talking about the entered the Navy?
91 to 2000. So
okay.
I did, as you said, I did 2 deployments to the Persian Gulf off Lincoln and Kitty Hawk. But I'll lead with this right away, man. My combat sorties up on the wall here were literally a joke. The toughest flying I ever did in my career was when I ended up going to Top Gun, which makes sense, right? Because if we go anywhere in the world and we're surprised or we're getting our ass kicked, then we failed. Our training has failed, right? It should go anywhere in the world should be a letdown.
Right.
So my Operation Southern Watch missions were boring. We were enforcing a no-fly zone. Could it have turned ugly? And yeah, of course, but it didn't. The toughest part of flying a combat mission for me was landing back aboard the boat at night, in bad weather and a pitching deck.
That's incredible what you guys do. Just watching, true videos on YouTube. I mean, it looks like a chiclet in the middle of the sea that you guys are landing on. It is, the first time that you do that, when you're given the controls to do it by yourself, I'm sure you're super nervous. Like, how are you getting over that and landing that plane?
You don't even remember it. It's 1,000% pure adrenaline. And as a student naval aviator, there ain't no instructor in your back seat the first time you go out to the boat. First of all, there's nobody that dumb that's going to jump in the trunk with you. You're by yourself, man. And I'll never forget, I carrier qualified off of Key West on board the USS America, which I think when I used to shave, I shaved with it 20 years ago because it's a scrap heap. It's that old. And launching out of Key West and flying over that ship for the first time with my fellow students, I'm like, there's no way on God's green earth I'm landing on a boat. But man, once you come into the break, things take over. You're on autopilot because at the field, they paint an aircraft carrier on the runway. And then to the left of the runway, they actually have the same optical landing system that they have on the ship. So you do hundreds and hundreds of landings at the field because it's all muscle memory.
Right.
I get to this point, I do this. I pull the power back to this. I do that. I look out at this point. So the first time you land aboard the boat, man, it's almost like shooting a gun. As you know, it should surprise you.
Right.
When you land on an aircraft carrier, you're like, oh my God, I'm on the flight deck right now. You usually don't realize what you've done until you get out of the plane and think about it. Like, holy crap, that just happened.
And at that point, you're like, man, it wasn't that bad at all.
Well, during the day, day landings aboard the ship is the sport of kings. I literally, with your clothes on, there ain't anything more fun. At night, I'd throw my own mother in the cockpit, man. It is without a doubt an absolute terror landing aboard the ship at night. It's as dark as the inside of a basketball, and if there's some stars out, and there's in the Gulf, there's oil platforms. The stars look like the oil platforms. You can get vertigo. And as you alluded to, man, it's a tiny speck on the horizon, man. I've had buddies who have just lost situational awareness and flown into the water behind the boat. I mean,
wow.
Night carrier operations are just, they suck. And they will prematurely age you, especially, when you leave Hawaii to go over, the first port of call was Hong Kong. The Pacific, folks, is ginormous. So there's like a week or so at a time in the middle of the Pacific where even if you had the most gas in the world, you can't fly to any point of land. The only place you're landing is that carrier.
Right.
Usually in the Persian Gulf or for operating in, the Mediterranean, you're within what we call bingo distance of an airfield. Like if something really bad happens, like, 200 miles away, there's Italy, all the airplanes can go there. In the middle of the Atlantic, something goes wrong, man. You're either swimming or you're landing on the boat.
What is your range with a full tank of gas for an F-18?
About 1,100 miles, 1,200 miles. And then obviously we can throw some drop tanks on there. And extend the flight. That was, also the most challenging part of an operation, no fly zone mission was getting gas off a tanker. During the day, it's kind of sporty, because you have a probe that comes out of the jet and there's a basket that comes out of the tanker you got to refuel off of.
Okay.
At night, it's like sticking a banana in a tiger's ass, man. It's all over the place, and you're low on gas anyway. That's why you're trying to get gas, and now you can't do it. And it's so over the years, all that shit builds up, man. Sit in your driveway and have a crane pull you up to the second story and then drop you. That's the force of a carrier landing. It is just boom. It is a controlled crash. So that beats up on your body. And then the catapult shot, you go from 0, you and me sitting like this, to 150 miles an hour in a second and a half. And then obviously, you can look at my Instagram and look at some of the videos of pulling G-forces, man. I remember a flight surgeon telling me one time, he's like, yeah, you guys don't want to know what that does to your brain.
I was going to say, aren't you almost hitting like concussive forces when you're landing on a jet that quickly?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. And, that's what the flight surgeon was getting at. He's like, we don't show any of the stuff that's really happened to you guys in the recruiting posters or anything like that, because it just beats the shit out of your body. Fighting the jet on the edge of consciousness can't be healthy. It's not, you're not eating a banana, man. You're beating the shit out of yourself. But, in an air-to-air engagement, you want to win, and it's about survival. So, the body was beaten up pretty bad too. And then in 15 years of flying fighters, I lost 16 buddies.
My
Not one,
condolences.
yeah, and you ready for this? This will shock a lot of people. Not one combat loss. These
Wow.
these were all weather, mechanical issues, stupidity, bad head work. Not one combat loss, man. We lost 8. We lost 8 before I even went to Iraq. It's called
Wow.
workups. Like you're gone more getting ready to go than when you're gone.
Okay.
We're up in the desert dropping bombs, making big rocks into little rocks. Oh, you forgot how to land aboard the boat. We got to go out to the boat for a month to relearn how to do that. Now let's go over. So you're doing workups, and during those workups, we lost 8. We
That's
lost
incredible.
8 air crew, man, and then I lost 8. The rest of my time flying fighters. So that trauma sucked. And then
Oh, I can imagine.
along the way, I lost 3 F-18 brothers who just decided to check out on their own. My groomsman in my wedding, Eric Swenson, Swede. His picture's right
Wow.
over there. He was a Marine Hornet buddy, one of my best friends from flight school, and beautiful bride and 5 kids. Just decided for whatever reason to check out on his own. So while flying fighters off a carrier is pretty cool, they get their pound of flesh. They definitely get their pound of flesh.
Yeah, I mean, we always associate ground forces with guys that are going through, traumas and PTSD. And, think of you guys as the pretty boys up there, but there's a lot more to it than any of us realize, including myself, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you should. I should hook you up with Mark Keller, call sign Slider. He's a buddy of mine. He's done the medicine work. He was a Tomcat guy, and a weapons delivery went wrong in Iraq, and he's like, dude, I took out 3 generations of innocent Iraqis, 12 innocent Iraqis. Wasn't our fault. And that dude hooked on benzos and
Wow.
suicide attempts, and so yeah, man, trust me, the aviation side of the house, we're in our own little cocoon, but it doesn't mean, and that comes to a topic that I talk about often, that we as veterans, or the folks in the first responder community, we do an awful job at, which is trauma shaming or trauma
Hmm.
grading. Like I remember, we'll get into it, but before going to sit with the medicine, I'm like, I'm going to go on a retreat with Marcus Luttrell. This guy was on the ground in the shit. I'm an embarrassment. My trauma doesn't rate any help. Don't do that, man.
No, it's amazing the
Trauma's
way they do that to ourselves.
Yeah, trauma's trauma. If something's
Yeah.
hurting you, it's hurting you. Don't trauma grade or trauma shame. So, I've been teaching. I've been saying that for the past 3-4 years. Like we gotta stop with the trauma shaming. I remember coming back from that first retreat and talking to some female veterans, and guess what? They have some pretty horrific trauma too. They weren't on the front lines getting shot at. You expect the enemy to shoot you or try and kill you or hurt you. You don't expect your squadron mate. So I discovered I kicked over a rock of MST, military sexual trauma. So
Yep.
we've been helping a lot of female and unfortunately male victims of MST, military sexual trauma, who weren't even close to combat. So trauma is trauma, man. I don't care if you're a civilian either, man. Everybody's got stuff that hurts them, and you deserve
Yeah.
to heal. But you're right, man. Trust me. I'm like, dude, I'm in the air conditioning at 30,000 feet. Ain't nothing wrong with me. I was wrong. There was
Yeah.
a lot wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't realize what we're going through as we're going through it. My PTSD was never, I always thought PTSD was as a result of seeing my fellow brother or sister get killed next to me. Mine ended up being, I was so, at so many points in other people's lives, I was at the center of the most intimately devastating moments of their lives
Yeah,
over and over. And brother,
yeah. I don't know
man,
how you did it,
I
man.
mean, it almost brings me to tears. Like thinking of some of these stories. And I was just talking to my first podcast was Taylor Kavanaugh, former SEAL, and I just recounted the story as we were doing a podcast. I said, T, we used to have calls, and this particular one was a suicide where we walk in, this guy had hung himself in his house, well-to-do neighborhood, on his oak beam in his kitchen.
Mm,
So his brother was the one who found him. His family, thank God, was not home. But by the end of this call, me and my partner holding his legs up while he and me and another copper on the
mm,
table cutting him down. I'm holding this dead man.
uh,
And now, as soon as we get done with that, I'm back in service. Go handle, whatever BS calls about to pop up, and I'm supposed to be normal.
mm,
You know what I mean? It's how do you process that? No
mhm,
matter, and I was always hyper focused. You you can't think of him. I hate to say it this coldly, but you can't think of him as a human, because
Right.
once you start doing that, now you're thinking of him as a dad and a father and this and that, and you cannot do your job, and you can't let it affect you.
You got to
But how does it not affect
compartmentalize.
you? Yeah,
Yeah.
you compartmentalize, but you got to realize it all affects you. You know, you think you're going down this road and neatly putting them in these boxes and locking them away, but man, it's burned into your psyche forever.
Yeah, so I use the Jack in a Box analogy, man. We compartmentalize pretty well. The military, the police, the fire rescue folks, they do a great job of training us to compartmentalize. But when they're done with us, they don't do a great job of teaching us how to decompartmentalize.
Yeah,
Right? All
zero.
these all these little boxes that you compartmentalize are going to Jack in the Box at the same time, maybe, and result in either bad behaviors, harm, or God forbid, checking out on your own. So we need to do a much better job with the decompartmentalizing than we do an equal job, and we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask you a question. Go back a little bit. I was just watching a documentary called The Waves of War the other day, and it followed the story of DJ Shipley, um, Marcus Capone, and Matty Roberts as they were coming back, kind of broken men from war. And it was just kind of detailing their journey. And then they found healing using Ibogaine in Mexico, like yourself. But to a common link in all three men was their trauma suffered at the hands of their fathers.
Mm.
And I myself had never spoken to, in 30 years, most of my coworkers. I didn't realize it was a common link. And I was raised by a very stern father. I was raised Irish Catholic. He was Irish. My mom was Italian. But listen, man, whatever happened, you didn't talk about it. Irish, it's just not spoken
No,
about. And I
exactly.
was never able to process my feelings. My father, literally in my life, really never spoke to me. He spoke at me.
Mm.
And how is that? Is that something that you yourself grew up with as well?
So, like we talked about, my dad kind of checked out,
Yep.
and my mom, for lack of a better word, stepped up into what would be the father role in some traditional Irish households. I remember one time, man, getting like four A's and a B in high school, and I'm a high school kid, man. You want to talk about some trauma? She beat the shit out of me, bro. And after losing your sister, your parents have checked out in high school. I thought at least I was a normal high school kid, man, having sneaking some beers in the woods, with your boys. But obviously, before cell phones and everything like that, my mom sitting on the couch. She had already gotten a phone call that her daughter had died. So me stumbling in at midnight, I walked in the door one time. She literally punched me square in the face. Not a slap on the face. It was a punch. Um, so it was more parental trauma than dad only, because my dad was just a broken unit,
Right.
and it was devastating. So yeah, and there we're probably gonna talk through some sentences that 5 years ago, Whiz, if I heard me talking like this, he'd kick my ass. But that guy died on the floor of a home in Mexico. But the medicine has the potential to heal 3 generations. I heard that and I'm like, that sounds like the land of fruits and nuts. And man, I got to tell you, on my journey, I got to experience my father, and I had never seen him happier. He was healed, and he was with my sister Monica, and they looked angelic, and they were perfect. And then, so they healed,
Right.
then I healed clearly. And the fact that my children, my dad didn't even know what the word meditation meant, probably. The fact that my
Yeah.
children know that dad and mom went and did this medicine and they're better humans. The fact that Matthew and Jack meditate, they journal. I mean, there's no way in
That's
hell.
unbelievable.
So I stopped this generational trauma. And I used to, again, raise an eyebrow at words like that. It's the truth. You carry that stuff. And you're right.
Absolutely.
The Irish, man, not exactly the happiest people in the world, and you got to toughen it up. Fuck your feelings. You can go cry in your room. Um, I stopped it. I've broken the chain, and at least I can look downward from this lineage and say, hey, man, I at least tried my best to break that generational trauma and start anew. But to be able to see my dad, to be able to see my sister happy, angelic, full of love, and on this podcast right now. They never left. They're with us right now. It healed
Absolutely.
me. It healed me. And I could see and feel from my father that he clearly was healed. He's like, man, we're with you, and everything's great, man. I could not be happier.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we'll talk about it further. Let's backtrack a little bit now. So, is there any more that you'd like to elaborate on your career in the Navy, or is this kind of winding down at this point?
No, yeah. So, well, it wound down and really in a bad way. But again, everything happens for a reason. So I got off active duty in 2000 to go be a rich airline pilot. Right? Everybody flying fighters. Let's go be an airline guy. Well, I won the lottery. The lottery in 2000 was get that airline job, but also get a job flying fighters in the Guard or the reserves. So I got hired by a reserve fighter squadron in Naval Air Station Fort Worth.
Okay.
So that was it, man. Airline job and fighter pilot, man. You get to bend the jet around on the weekends with no responsibility, right?
Who's better than you?
Yeah. So I got hired by FedEx and we moved to Fort Worth to be where the reserve squadron was. And man, I hated it. I lasted 10 months at FedEx because I had to commute to Memphis, and then you show up to a trip for FedEx at midnight, and you're
Really?
flying until 8 in the morning, trying to get to the crash hotel before the sun comes up so you can sleep during the day. And I was a 33-year-old kid, man, and I'm flying with captains that look like horse shit from hell. I'm like, I'm not doing this. And
Yeah.
I remember the day formally, I'm like, I'm leaving FedEx, as I was in my reserve squadron in the ready room, and I'm like falling asleep. I just gotten back from a FedEx trip, and my buddy throws me his cell phone. His call sign was Nips. Nips goes, "Hey, Whiz, hey, dude, here's my phone." He's like, "Hey, if crew scheduling calls, tell them you're me and you'll be there in 2 hours. I'm going flying." I'm like, "Are you shitting me?" So he was getting paid by American Airlines to sit reserve, and he was flying for the Navy and getting paid by the Navy. So I quit FedEx, went to American, and I shit you not, man, the morning of September 11th, I was packing for my first trip to fly for American Airlines.
Ah, that's
And
incredible.
yeah, Susie came in the bedroom and said, "Hey, you better look at the TV. Somebody hit the World Trade Center with an airplane." I'm like, "I'm busy, woman, small airplane, bad weather." And she just had that look on her face. I'm like, "Okay." So I went out to the TV room and saw what you guys saw. Beautiful day in New York City, not a cloud in the sky, and a massive smoking hole and fire. And I'm like, I'm standing there going through my mental aviation checklist of how that happened. And next plane hit. It took a nanosecond. I'm like, we're in
Yeah.
attack. I
Yep.
ran into the bedroom. I still have my American Airlines uniform in the plastic from the cleaners. I pushed that out of the way. I threw on my flight suit, threw on my boots, didn't tie them, jumped in my old 89 Porsche. And I think I broke the land speed record getting out to the air station. They closed it and went to a ThreatCon Delta. So me and one other F-18 squadron mate made it out there, Gruff. We called down to maintenance and said, "Get 2 jets ready." We were a poor Navy squadron in Texas, so all we had was bullets. We said, "Throw bullets in the plane."
Okay.
Other phone rang. Next to us was an Air Force Reserve fighter squadron. They had F-16s, and obviously the Air Force is rich and has resources, so they're tied into NORAD. So the general said, "Whiz, what do you got?" I said, "It's me and Gruff. We got 2 Hornets." He said, "Get over here. Come over to our command post. I got 4 F-16 guys. Let's brief. Let's get airborne." So it was like Lexington and Concord, man. We ran over to their command post. We're in there briefing. The Air Force guys are going to come over and arm our jets with missiles. It was a team effort, man. As we're in the command post, the Pentagon's getting hit. We're like, holy shit, let's get airborne. Missing
Yeah.
plane in Pennsylvania. So they got airborne first, the F-16s, and Gruff and I went to the end of the runway, fully armed, and waiting for them to land when they ran out of fuel. But by the time they landed, all the airliners in the U.S. had landed. So Gruff and I sat at the end of the runway with the engines running for a couple hours there, man, and it was
So
nuts.
you guys talking amongst yourselves as this is going on, wondering if you're going to be tasked with shooting down a commercial airliner at that point?
Oh, God, in the command post, the general said that. He said, "Whiz, go back, after you guys get out of your flight, whoever's in the ready room now, you tell them if they're not prepared to shoot down a civilian airliner today,
Ugh.
they can't fly." And here's the crazy part, Mike, is the 15 of my squadron mates were flying that day. They were raw
Really?
airline pilots. So imagine, first of all, being ordered to shoot down an airliner full of Americans,
Yep.
let alone one flown by your best friend. So it was
Thank God.
it was a very surreal day. So a week later, I got a photocopied letter from American Airlines HR that said, "Dear crew member, you're furloughed." And if you're not familiar, furloughed's a polite airline term for, fired, laid off.
Yep.
So yeah, man, that was a huge fork in the road. Susie ended up waiting tables at an Italian restaurant. I mean, we lost everything in the blink of an eye. But I'm like, dude, get over yourself. I'm watching footage of people at Ground Zero putting pictures up on a fence, like, "Where's my husband?" I'm like, oh my God, man, you don't have any problems, Whiz. Get over yourself. Get up. So I, thankfully or not, our reserve squadron got a shitload more money because we were going to be mobilized for we're on a war footing. So that was my, airline career was a brief one.
Did you think about going back active duty at that point?
I did.
Or could you have?
Oh yeah, a bunch of guys went back on act. Yeah, the airlines furloughed thousands and thousands of pilots, man. So a lot of guys are like, "Can I get back on active duty?" So I thought about it, but our reserve squadron was going to be mobilized for combat anyway. We were the first reserve fighter squadron to get mobilized for combat since the Korean War. So what happened was I got put on active duty. Our squadron did, but we had the average F-18 squadron at the time goes on the ship with 15 pilots because there's not unlimited room. There's only a certain amount of room. And we had like 19 guys in our reserve squadron. So 4 of us were on the beach, and we were going to rotate, a couple guys out. Like one guy was going to go early because his wife was pregnant, but he'd rotate back. So I was sitting at home as Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off with my sea bag packed, like, yeah, let's go. Commanding officer ended up sending me an email like 4 months into the deployment. They're like, "It's over. We're coming home." I'm like,
really?
Son of a bitch. Well, let's fast forward to the end of that story. We know it wasn't over. It ended up being an insurgency, and we ended up being there. But the initial Operation Iraqi Freedom was like, remember, we stormed into Baghdad and arrested his boys and it's over with, Whiz. Little did we know, an insurgency, and then the whole shit happened after that. But around that time, as we were getting ready to get mobilized and stuff like that, I got hired by JetBlue. And I'm like, and it was a younger airline at the time. I'm like, you know what, man? That would be my 3rd airline in 3 years. Screw it. I had taught myself when I was on active duty to trade stocks and options. And I was like, because you don't join the military to get rich, clearly.
Yeah.
But, I'm reading the Wall Street Journal in the ready room and stuff like that. So I taught myself how to trade. So I ended up popping, and it's not, trading's a form of combat, right? Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to get their ass kicked. Why wouldn't you use the same procedures and strategy, tactic, risk management, contingency planning? So I applied that to my trading, and it worked pretty damn well. I was paying my mortgage, and things were going good. And a trading
How are you teaching yourself? You just reading books or online class? Really?
Reading books, and then obviously Al Gore invented the internet. You could start trading online. You could start learning stuff like that. So I was all self-taught, man. And it's not that hard, to be honest with you. So I popped up on the radar of a volatility arbitrage options trading firm in Chicago, and they flew me up there, and they went mafia on me. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I'd never seen that many zeros in my life. I'm like,
really?
I don't know. I felt like Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is kind of what I do. And they're like, wow, that's brilliant. I'm like, wait a minute, you're a multi-billion-dollar trading firm and you don't do this type of stuff? And they're like, no, come up here. So we went up to the board of trade for 3 years and lived out in a suburb called Naperville and did the whole thing. But man, like I told you earlier, I'm a beach guy. I'm a Navy guy. Susie's from God's Waiting Room, Boca Raton. So I'm like, you know what? I said, let's move. I can do this on our own. Let's go down to Boca and start our own company. So we did that and started Top Gun Options. And then around 2020, man, you talked about the one book I wrote, COVID Crash. Holy crap. I had a deep throat in the White House. And in December 2019, he's like, dude, we are freaking out. There's a level 4 weapons.
Oh, they knew that far back?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. I knew in December, it hit in Jan 20 or whatever. I knew in December, my buddy's like, dude, we are going ape shit. The Chinese, they locked down this city. They're digging up the highways. They're making mobile crematoriums. Something got out of the only level weapons 4 lab. Oh, and by the way, I told all my TGO members this, and I posted it on social media, and I lost like 20 social media accounts because I was racist or peddling disinformation.
Yep.
I was right, but I bring this up because I started, I'm like, this is going to be a horror for the stock markets. I'll never forget January 22nd. Thank you, Donald Trump. He was in Davos, right? Davos, Switzerland. They have that annual beautiful people get together, all the rich and limousine latte liberals telling us how to live our lives. Donald Trump was being interviewed by Joe Kiernan on CNBC, and it was almost a throwaway question at the end. Joe's like, "Hey, Mr. Trump, before we end our interview, what's up with this China flu or virus or something?" And I'll never forget. Trump's like, "Dumb question, Joe. Nobody asked more dumb questions than you. Stupid. I trust ye. Great backswing. Been to Mar-a-Lago. Not coming here. You're an idiot." I looked into this camera and I said, "Get out." I said, "Get out of the market. Buy puts on the S&P 500. Get long volatility." He's lying. Because I did outsider trading, not insider trading. I told everybody who would listen.
Yep.
And this is a critical part of the story. And I remember senators leaving the skiff going, "Everything's fine. Don't panic." And then getting on the phone to call their broker and all their friends and family to get them. And they didn't get into trouble. So,
yep.
But I did outsider trading. Yeah. And then, the alleged smart money on CNBC were crying, "We need to shut markets down. We need to close the Dow." I'm like, no. I'm on the other side of your trades there, fellas. You're Mr. Smart Money. And it's in my book, too. Trump deleted it, but he had a tweet one of those days. "Stocks are looking good here. I'd be a buyer of stocks." The next day, the Dow went down 3,000 points. And we made like 75 grand in minutes at the open. I bring this up because, we made I think it was like $2.5 million worth of trades in a couple weeks. So after that, I'm like, my dad, God bless his soul, he died of a broken heart years later. But my dad, Matthew, you can't take it with you. Yeah. You're not a pharaoh. They're not putting money in your casket, to go to the next life. So I looked at Susie, and this was around the time my best friend Swede checked out. I said, "You know what? Why don't we take this money, Susie, and throw it over the fence? Let's start. We got a nice house and car, and we're fine. Let's put the ladder down." So we started a foundation back then, four years ago, called Top Gun Fighter Foundation, right? So I got Top Gun Options, really big marketing department. Top Gun Options, Top Gun Fighter Foundation. So let's do something to end veteran suicide. And back then the number was 17, which is, and I hate putting this type of energy even out to the universe, but I have to say it. If 17 children were being killed every day, not annually, but I'm talking every day in a school shooting, we would flip the fuck out.
Oh yeah,
it would be a national
over
emergency.
6,000 a year.
Yeah, we'd do something immediately.
Yep.
17 veterans. So the number at the time was 17 veterans. Fast forward a couple years later, it's closer to 22. Fast forward to 2 years ago, a couple small community colleges, right? Duke University and the University of Alabama. Yep. They did a deep dive into Uncle Sam's numbers, and it turns out they're full of shit. So Duke and the University of Alabama say it's closer to 44 veterans every day. We're going to run out of veterans, right? But back in 2020, the number 17 hit me. I'm like, I can't even fathom 17 veterans checking out on a daily basis. We got to do something about veteran suicide.
At this point, you have not gone through your healing experience with psychedelics. No.
We started a nonprofit to try and end veteran suicide. You know how? I had no clue. I'm like, do you help buy a guy a suit? Do you pay the rent? Do you help him write a resume? I was throwing shit against the wall. How do you keep people from killing themselves? So around that time of me going, I don't know what to do. God provides. A close buddy of mine said, "Hey, there's a group of Navy SEALs and Special Forces, folks that go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic-assisted therapy to heal their trauma. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you want to go?" And I said, go to Mexico in a couple weekends and do drugs with Navy SEALs. It sounds fucking like a great time.
Sign me up, baby.
Yeah. I had no clue what I was getting in for. I mean, I had a little bit of a clue because they,
Right.
you do your, you really have no clue, but I had a little clue. I read the manual. I talked to my guide. I'm like, huh. And I ended up, God is awesome because I ended up going with a pretty cool group. So Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, Jared Taylor, JT from Black Rifle Coffee, another team guy, a team guy with Marcus, one of his brothers, and then an NFL veteran. His name's Robert Gallery. He was an All-American at Iowa, linebacker.
I remember that monster.
Yeah, and then he played for
Was he a lineman?
He was a linebacker, I thought. Yeah, middle linebacker.
I think he was a lineman. I'm gonna have to check that out. But I remember him because he was one of the first few guys who started with all eye black everywhere. Yep.
He was a demon, man, and
he had long hair. He looked like the Undertaker, man, with the makeup and the hair.
You got to look at him today. Well, and here's what's interesting because you fly into San Diego. And why? Because if you do what we're going to talk about in San Diego, you're a felon. If you do it an hour south, it'll save your life. So let's we can dig into that. But anyway, so we do a little convoy from San Diego down to the retreat center in Mexico, and I was in the car with Robert, and man, this guy was a dead iceberg. He was just this big gray death. I remember sitting in the car with him like, holy shit, this guy is. Let me fast forward. A year after this, we were at a fundraiser, Susie and I in San Diego, and I get this massive thing hits me. I'm like, holy shit, what am I going to get into a fight?
You're still upright after that guy hit you?
Yeah, exactly.
It
was a love tap.
Yeah.
And I look at him, I'm like, oh my God, he is a different human being 1 year later. But anyway, so we drive down from San Diego. We went to a place called the Mission Within in Ensenada or wherever it is, just, south of San Diego.
Okay.
And man, it was the most spiritual, transformative experience of my life, of my existence. So Friday night we did a fire ceremony, what we want to get rid of, what we want to bring in, and then we took a medicine called ibogaine. So iboga, I-B-O-G-A, is root bark from Gabon, Africa. It is the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. They call it the grandfather of psychedelics. It's got, I think, 13 different alkaloids in it. And in the West, we pull out one of these alkaloids called ibogaine. And ibogaine is incredible for addiction, traumatic brain injury, and PTSD. It's like taking the nuke core out of a nuke bomb.
Right.
So we took the ibogaine and
how do you take it?
It was in a capsule.
Ingested. Okay.
Yeah, a couple years later, Susie and I went down to a place in Costa Rica called Awaken Your Soul, where we actually did iboga, where you actually do the root bark. And it's a little fear factor-ish, man. It's sawdust. It's root bark. It's shavings.
Okay.
So when they pour the iboga in your mouth and you got some water, it's like you're chewing a matzo ball, man, like a sawdust thing to get down. It ain't iboga's elite.
Not appetizing.
No. The 2 capsules of ibogaine went down just fine. But man, I got to tell you, bro, it was I've never when I got home, I had to learn an SAT word I should have known in high school, ineffable. So anything I'm going to tell you falls infinitely short of what I actually experienced. I get to points in this conversation where I can't describe what I experienced.
Yeah, I say when I describe mine, it dilutes the magic. You just cannot, I can understand because I've been there.
Yeah.
You've been through it, but to explain it to others who have not, it's difficult, if not impossible.
It's trying to, you're putting a watch on a caveman, right? I mean, it just doesn't even, it's not even gonna. But the first, I guess I could break it up into halves. The first, and folks, this is a waking dream with iboga. I got eye shades on, eye shades up. There's the nurses holding space. There's Marcus. Okay, eye shades down. Movie. So you're not tripping. You're not asleep. You're not. You're wide awake, man. But I guess I could break it up into halves. And the first half was I got home from this and I looked at Susie. I'm like, I don't need to travel ever again in my life. And she's like, why? I'm like, I saw everything. Whatever word you choose to use, I choose to use the word God, source, creator, truth, divine, whatever word you want to insert there. This entity, God, gave me a tour, man. It was like, look at this shit, man. Look at this. And you are a part of this. You are, man. So it was just the tour was incredible. I've never seen so much beauty and just in the smallest minute detail, a ladybug up to universes. I got to experience everything.
And is
then
God speaking to you in your journey?
Not
Literally,
a word,
conversing?
but
Okay.
yes, it was all energy. So I didn't know God at that point. I was just getting a tour, right? I'm like, wow, this is pretty fucking cool, man. And then after that tour ended, I'm in space. Not like scary. I'm like, it's just beautiful space. And then just up here, kind of to the right, the most brilliant white light was there. And it was just emanating absolute love and energy. So, of course, I'm like, okay. I'm like, are you God? And then again, there was never, God doesn't communicate with, God doesn't need to speak. God communicates in energy or talks through other people or music. And the answer was, of course, yes. And man, I just kind of, I exploded into just, and then doubting Whiz, right? I came back and collected myself. I'm like, can you give me a sign? And around this beautiful white light in cursive writing, the word sign appeared a couple times and went away.
Really?
And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, not only is it God, he's got a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I remember going, where have you been? And God said, I've always been, and I will always be. He said, where have you been, my son? And I'm like, oh man. And then I remember just dropping to my knees and going, I am just so sorry. I am a sinner. I'm a horrible father, husband, human. I'm a drunk, drugs, and God just with a wave, with a thought, all of that went away. All of that went away. It was like, Matthew, I have this. This is not you. This is you. And I'll never forget this. God said, Matthew, I don't make imperfect things. You're perfect. This stuff I can help you. It's gone. Now let's go. I'm going to show you. Let's go type of thing. It was the most transformative. It was, decades of healing in an instant. My guide told me that. She's like, that's called the holy instant. Like literally with a way, it was gone. 52 years of shame, regret, trauma, drugs, alcohol, were gone in an instant.
Incredible.
And then, at a certain point, I remember Monica appearing. And
Monica's your sister.
Monica's my sister, and she was perfect. She was angelic. She was so happy. And then my father, right behind her. And I can't remember the last time I had seen my father smile. And he was smiling. And they were both perfect. And I was at peace. I had missed him. I had missed him. And we had some time together. And then they started to go away. They started to disappear a little bit. It was a horror. I cried out. I didn't want them to leave.
Right.
And they came back. And they looked at me and smiled again. And then they started to leave again. But this time I followed. And they went into my daughter. They went into the trees. They ran into the beach, the ocean. They never left. And it healed me.
They're everywhere.
That's the instant that I realized they never left. And they've been with me this entire time. There was hairy times trying to land aboard the ship where I was convinced my sister was flying formation with me. So I was healed, man. It was just absolutely incredible. there was a point where God, this was kind of towards the beginning of when I met with God, where Marcus and JT sounded like they were in it, man. They needed some help. And I remember going, I'm an air guy. They're ground. I got to protect these guys. I remember going, these guys are in trouble. I need to help them. And God said, Matthew, they're getting exactly what they need. Let's focus on you. I said, nah. And God is always gentle. I said, no, man, I got to listen to them. They're in pain. God gently, just again, Matthew, trust me. They're getting exactly what they need. Let's go. And I did. And that next morning, everybody looked like different human beings. The eyes were lighter. And I remember looking at both of them. I'm like, you good? And they're like, never better. So it sounded like you were killing some demons last night. And yeah, we were. And they're gone. So there was just so much in the, quote, second half of the experience. And it's incredible that this medicine from Central West Africa, almost to a person who does ibogaine, has a similar experience.
Yep.
The first half is a visualization of, check this out, man, that you are part of. And then the second half is tailored to them.
Do you see geometric patterns with ibogaine?
Oh my God, yeah. The fractals, we call it
Ayahuasca.
sacred geometry. Yeah.
Yep. Ayahuasca,
Dude,
same thing.
I didn't see anything that didn't exist. I saw everything, man. So from fractals to, it literally was a brief, God saying, sit down and let me show you how I cook. And you are this incredible part of this, right? So that was the ibogaine. And then you get like a day, we call it it's a discovery day. We call it a gray day, man. You feel like you got hit by a bus driven by God.
Oh, how long is that whole experience now, the ibogaine?
What's that?
How long is that entire experience?
I was in the medicine.
That's long, right?
12 to 14 hours. Robert,
wow.
He was in it for a day and a half.
Wow.
They ran an IV. He came down like, 18 hours later, kind of sat with us for a little bit and tried to eat a little, and he went back upstairs. And Doc Martine, the medical director, and the guides, of course, they've seen all this stuff before, but of course the four of us are like, oh my God, is he? And they're like, this is perfect. He's got a lot. The medicine's in there doing its work. You guys don't have to worry about a thing. Even though I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Day and a half later, he was a different human being. He literally, the neuroplasticity of these medicines, he's a different human being. I bumped into him in Vail a couple months ago, man. And again, he just looks better and better. And he's actually, I think he said he's starting a foundation for athletes to sit with ibogaine and heal their head trauma. So, day and a half later, we sit with a different medicine called 5-MeO-DMT. It's a toad.
Yeah, I've done it.
I want to sue these guys for deceptive trade practices, because the way it was sold to me was it's 10 to 15 minutes and it's the icing on the cake. The ibogaine's the hard work. Dude, my 12 to 14 hours, I was in a one-man luge with God, and it was the coolest thing I've ever done. Those guys sounded like they were getting their asses kicked, right? So when they sold me on the toad of like, it's the icing on the cake, 10 to 15 minutes, I'm like, dude, I was 10, 12 hours. All right, I can do this. Holy shit, man. I had the exact opposite experience with the toad. And it's funny because at the Mission Within, they do the medicine on the top floor. Beautiful. You're overlooking the Pacific, and it's just a beautiful, and they put everybody else waiting to do the medicine like 4 stories below. Now I know why. So you don't hear what's going on, man. So Marcus went first. I didn't hear anything. And then, I get up there and I'm sitting with my guy. Marcus Capone was actually holding space for me. So Marcus, other Marcus. Yeah. So there's 2 Marcuses on our retreat, Marcus Capone and then Marcus Luttrell. So Marcus was in there, my guide, and then the doctor who served the medicine. And man, I remember sitting on the bed, with my legs crossed, facing the Pacific, and, took the toad. They gave me the brief, and everything like that. And as I exhaled, man, and they slid the eye shades down on me and went to lower me on the bed, there was no bed. I think of think of the Millennium Falcon. I went from 0 to hyperspace to white in the blink of an eye. There was
Yep.
no stopping, man. It was instantaneous. And I try and clean this up to not scare people, but I'm not doing it to scare. This is what I died. It was ego death, but I absolutely and you know I still fly. You don't want to hear a pilot say this. I have zero fear of death. Now I want to live a long time and see my grandkids and yell at them to get off the lawn, but I know exactly what's going to happen. I am at
Yep.
peace with death because I became, and you know, sometimes I get angry texts, go back to church or something like that. Folks, if you don't think your God is part of you or one with God, I don't know what religion you're practicing, man, but I was instantaneously one with God, with source. And it was peace. It was infinite, but it was only now. That's so hard to understand, right? I got up this morning. I'm going to watch Gladiator tonight. That we have this sense of time.
Yeah.
On the 5-MeO DMT, there is zero time. There was only now, and that now was perfect. It was orgasmic. It was a cosmic. I've never experienced anything like that. So, God, you know, and I have horrific tinnitus from flying jets. It's horrible. I can't sit in silence. Whenever I try and meditate, man, I have this the rest of my life. My back's killing me. The vision in my eyes going. I was healed. Everything was perfect. When you're in the present, and my guide reminded me the next day, I'm like, everything was gone. My tinnitus was here. She's like, you were in the presence of God. When you're with perfection, Jesus could heal, you know, the blind by touching the lady's eye or something like that. She's like, of course, everything was healed. But anyway, so it was kind of like God was like, do you get it? Right? This everything's fine, man. This is what's it's supposed to be. I'm convinced this is hell, man. War, poverty, hate, crime. This is purgatory. This is hell. What I got to experience was heaven. But at a certain point, God's like, all right, well, clearly you can't stay. You have a lot of work to do. You know, you got to brief complete. Let's go, Matthew.
Yeah.
I remember trying to fit back into this imperfect, what I consider imperfect vessel. I remember trying to get back into me, so to speak, and there was still some darkness. There was some shame or regret or booze or just funk. And I remember this part of it. I don't remember most of what I'm telling you, but I remember this part of yelling, screaming at the top of my lungs to try and force the bad shit out. And clearly it wasn't all going out because I kind of remember the beginning of the next one. I like take a huge deep breath and louder and longer. And then before I know it, I open up my eyes and I'm facing the wall. I'm like, I was facing the Pacific. Now I'm facing this way. And around me, Marcus, my guide, and the doctor are completely in tears.
Really?
And they're looking at me. And I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, are you okay? I'm like,
Yeah.
I've never felt better in my life. And they're like, okay. I'm like, why are you guys crying? And they're like, then they give you some fruit and, you know, for you, they don't say anything. They're just holding space because they don't want to say, dude, you flipped, you know, or they're just kind of hanging. And it was the best fruit I've ever tasted. And I cried for at least 30 minutes sitting there. And it's funny because later at dinner, they're kind of debriefing now. They're like, do you remember, you know, one of the first things you said after, you know, on the bed? I'm like, no. They're like, you said, I can't wait to tell Susie I love her forever because I finally know what forever means. And I'm like, oh, that's great. So I got, you know, that's my Valentine's Day quote every year. But it's the truth.
It's awesome.
I felt infinite love. I felt forever, which was only now. And they're like, and you also, I think the first thing I said when I came out and I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, yeah, are you? I'm like, I said freedom. They're like, you said this is freedom. I'm free. So that was I might have been in it for 10 to 15 minutes, dude, but it was a violent it was not for the faint of heart, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because JT and JJ snuck up from the basement to the floor right beneath where I was doing it. So
Okay.
all they heard was me screaming twice at the top of my lungs, and then a ruckus, you know, like, you know.
Yeah.
So Cynthia, my guide, you know, is walking me down the stairs, and I guess she was behind me. They're sitting on the couch, and they are looking at me like they've seen a ghost. They're terrified. And later they're like, you come down the stairs after screaming bloody murder with this shit-eating grin look
Yeah,
on your
exactly.
face. And I'm like, yeah, I was wondering why you guys were terrified. And I guess Cynthia was behind me going, you know, don't say any, you know, shh, you know, she hustled me outside real quick because she didn't want, I needed to go decompress. But
Yeah.
they're like looking at me, and she's like hustling me outside. And I guess she came back in, you know, to walk by them to go upstairs to get ready for one of them. And they're like, what the fuck was that? What's the screaming? And Cynthia's like, it was a happy scream. And JT's like, that didn't sound fucking happy, man. What, you know? So there's something to be said for not, you know, comparing experiences. Because over the years, I've held space for people doing Toad. I've seen people cry. I've seen people just giggle. I haven't seen people do a damn thing. I'm a flipper, and I was a flip. So
That's great.
but that is its own standalone. You could do a retreat. You could do just healing with Toad. It is a global thermonuclear healing device. So be very, very careful with anything that we're talking about.
Yeah, you're not joking about it because Alicia and I, my wife, had two practitioners come to our house, and we did it here. And like you said, it's like a rocket ship. It's funny because it looks like you're smoking meth. It's
It
crystallized
does.
secretions. You know, they secrete liquid from a toad. They dry it out, and then they break it up, and it looks like it's like glass crystals, and you smoke it in a meth pipe. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I wasn't that comfortable smoking out of a meth pipe, but as soon as he kicked in, man, I was transported to an 8-year-old boy, and I remember walking in the house. I'd been playing with a neighbor down the block, and a kid next door that I'm not supposed to play with came next door and was talking to the kid I was playing with. My dad must have seen that. So I walk in the house. He's standing behind our door, and I thought he was playing a game. I'm like, hey, Dad, what are you doing, hiding? And he walked up to me. My dad was like 6'3", 250, punches me in the chest, sends me across the room. And I just remembered like being that 8-year-old kid, like I was in that room, man, that's heaving, like, why did you hit me? And
Oh.
you know, those my wife and the two practitioners like, yeah, you were crying within like 20 seconds. And I remember looking up my mom at the time, trying to get some help, and she's like shaking her head like disgustedly at me. And he's like, I told you not to play with him. And I'm like, I wasn't. He was talking to Johnny. And just felt like so impotent, and there was such a feeling of hatred that I had towards my parents at that point at eight
Mm-hmm.
years old. And, you know, I was, I don't know, man. My relationship with my parents was, their love was transactional. If I was doing what they wanted,
Yeah.
cool. If I didn't, like, I graduated with an accounting degree, decided it was not for me. Law enforcement was the way I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
I became like the enemy. It was unbelievable. And looking back, some of the things they did and said, like I graduated Atlanta Police Academy. I told them when the date was for graduation. My parents like, nah, we can't make it.
Mm.
You know, and at the time I was unable to express feelings. If this was now, I'd be like, man, that's like the most hurtful thing you could ever say. But I
Exactly.
was like, basically, fuck them. Just okay, no problem. Hang up the phone.
Mm.
But yeah, it's amazing. The journeys are so different on these medicines.
Correct. Yeah. It's and you know, to folks listening, another one of those sentences that I kick my own ass would be this: the medicine calls to you, right? So
It
if you're
does.
listening to this and you're like, "Huh," the medicine's calling you. If you're listening to this going, "There's no fucking way," it's not calling to you. So it's very black and white. And I'll also add that if the medicine is calling to you, and you simply say this sentence or this, you have this thought, you don't even have to say it out loud. You know what? I want to try this, or I want to heal. I have stuff I want to fix. As soon as that thought is complete, that's out to the universe, man. Things start changing. Every time I go maybe to sit and do a tune up, you know, maybe an annual knock the rust off, when I agree to do that, things start changing. The universe starts conspiring to help make that happen. You know, a lot of people Because the guy, you got good on Nixon, man, in the war on drugs and scaring the shit out of people with psychedelics and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Oh, what if I have a bad trip, man? I've helped close to 100 heroes heal and family members. Not knock on wood, not one quote negative experience. Anything that was quote negative, you lean into it, or there's something to be learned from that. So there's no, I'm going to freak out and jump out a window type of shit, man. All that turned out to be a lie. Watch How to Change Your Mind on Netflix, man. It's 4 episodes. You can binge watch it.
We just watched it. Yep.
Yeah, it's incredible. The absolute lies. And people might be sitting there like, oh, well, it's, Schedule 1 in the United States. It's a crime. Folks, I've been to D.C., man, and I've been behind closed doors with congressmen who, Whiz, I love what you're doing, but you're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to have a problem with them? Ain't that your job? So I don't care what your political leanings are. I was wrong. I thought the Democrats were the wearing the drug rugs and the hippies and, well, we're pro psychedelics. Man, they turned out to be the ones in bed with big pharma for the past couple of years. The COVID vax and all that shit. The Dems in the old days were hippies and anti-war and pro-free speech and don't trust the government. Everybody's flopped. Now we got, and RFK used to be a Democrat. Maybe he still calls himself that, but at least RFK is like, I am pro psychedelics for veterans. We got Joe Rogan. We got Sean Ryan. Pete Hegseth, the SecDef nominee, was on the Sean Ryan show saying, yay for psychedelics for veterans. We got Congress, Marcus came back, Luttrell. His brother Morgan saw him, Navy SEAL, combat vet. Holy shit, my brother cleaned up his mess. He went there. His exact quotes are, it was the best and worst ass kicking I've ever had in my life. And now he's a congressman. So, Luttrell, Crenshaw, Zinke, all the Navy SEAL congressmen, there are so many vets in Congress that are pro psychedelics. So hopefully we're going to see some things change in here because, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act or the Affordable Care Act, the government labels things the exact opposite of what they are.
Exactly.
These are not a Schedule 1 drug. I'm
nope.
I'm not.
And just so people know, the controlled substances are Schedule 1 to, I believe, 4. 1 being the most severe that are right for the most abuse. You will never, ever, ever abuse ayahuasca, ibogaine, psilocybin. These are not things you take for euphoric enjoyment.
Correct.
They are therapeutically beneficial. Correct. It's nothing. I tell people all the time. I remember one guy was telling me he was a drug addict, and he's like, "Oh, another drug. I'll get high." No. There is no component of this that's enjoyable. No. You are going to go through the most profound cathartic changes of your life, but it's not something you're going to be like, "Man, I don't want to do that again." No. As for me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it literally changed the essence of myself as a man, my soul, and made me more empathetic and made me more loving. And by no way, shape, or form am I perfect. I still get angry driving. Sure. Healing's not linear. You go up and down. It ebbs and flows. But man, if you want to put your priorities in order, you shake off. You're going to lose friends. You're going to see what's important in life. Mm-hmm. The little things become non-existent to you. And your whole philosophy about life changes.
Dude, you nailed it. One thing about the Schedule 1 that you nailed, these are anti-addictive. Yep. So I'm not proud to say it, or actually I am proud to say it, before the medicine. I was a fucking drinker, man. I don't know if you can be a good drinker. I was a bad drinker. Up to 8 months, a year after the ibogaine, if I smelled alcohol, it made me dry heave. I even would look at a bottle of alcohol, I'm like, It destroyed alcohol in my life. They did a study, 85% of active heroin addicts, 1 treatment of ibogaine, 0 withdrawal symptoms the next day, and they never looked at this stuff again. Up to 3 years. They stopped the study because they're like, if you do heroin after 3 years of not doing it, okay, that's not the ibogaine. So it's anti-addictive.
Yeah.
Right? It destroyed all that shit in my life, and it's the most therapeutic thing I've done in my life. So the definition of a Schedule 1 drug, no therapeutic use, a high risk of addiction, is a cigarette. And it's alcohol. When you look at I have a chart of the harm to others and harm to you scale of these substances. Over here is alcohol and tobacco. Over here is psilocybin.
Yeah.
And, ibogaine and all this stuff's over here. So everything legal is on the left side of the chart that will kill you and
Yeah.
also kill others. You ain't taking ibogaine and getting behind the wheel of your car at a fraternity party. I can guarantee you that.
Exactly.
So, and then to your point, it changed. Let me fix that. It didn't change anything. When God knocked this entire shell off and showed me my perfect soul, it got me back to who I was. Because when I came home and Susie gave me a week of kind of, space, and I took her to the beach, and it was a 6-hour debrief, man. And she's like, this is the guy I met in college. Look at you. My God. She didn't say, who are you? She's like, I got this. I got my Matthew back. But to your point, being more empathetic and stuff like that, dude, I got rid of my Porsche, but up until I was at 9/11, I'm in the left lane honking at people, flashing my lights, dude. Now I'm, it's really changed every part of me. And your point about being more empathetic, could you imagine cops showing up to a call with more empathy, who are healed humans, instead of you from one death notification to an next call, man? If you had when they said defund the police and we need to reimagine policing, I'm like, yeah, why don't you heal these people?
Yeah.
That's how you reimagine policing. They ain't going to go boot stomping on people if they're healed. They might have to, but if it gets to that point, like one of the other reasons I think these medicines are still legal is they can turn warriors into peacemakers. But don't get me wrong, man. You break into my house or invade my country, I'll turn into a killer.
Oh yeah.
In the
if it's time to get down, man, I can still get down.
That's exactly right. But the lead up to that, it's the John Rambo type of thing, man. I'm just kind of leave me alone and I'm happy. But if we need to, we need to. But it absolutely can turn warriors into peacemakers. I've seen Sean Ryans. I've seen Mark. I've seen all these meat-eating, knuckle-dragging guys who are on the exact opposite end of the scale. So we got the hippie drug rug party of Democrats who are now pro-war, and now you have all these Republicans and conservatives who sat with the medicine and healed. It's really bizarro world going on here. I'm here for it though, and I hope under the Trump administration or RFK or whoever, we finally do some healing. Because I tell people, aside from trying to end veteran suicide, my secondary mission objective of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation is to go away. There should not be a vets. There should not be a heroic hearts. There should not be a No Fallen Heroes Foundation. We shouldn't be doing this. There should not be nonprofits healing our heroes. And there certainly should not be nonprofits. For the past couple of years, getting on the jet bridge to go to Mexico or Costa Rica would make me furious. I'm having to sneak out of this country to heal our heroes in another, or, are you shitting me? Thank you to, the great voters of Oregon and Colorado. At least we can, they're legal on a state level. So I'm proud to say, we've done 2 retreats in Colorado. We've done a retreat in Oregon, and we actually did one in Sedona too, under the radar. But my brother, Justin Lepre in Austin, Texas, he operates under the church kind of banner.
Yeah. Sacraments.
So he can do it as a sacrament. So the times they are changing, man. Again, 5 years ago, Whiz, if I heard me sitting on a podcast talking like this, I'd kick my own ass, but that guy's dead. So that should serve as a beacon to everybody, man. You have the opportunity to heal, and not necessarily to change, maybe to get back to who you were as a kid. I remember it's in my journal, the back of my journal. She told us to bring pictures from important moments of your life, but also you as a child. And I have this picture of me as a towhead, little blonde-haired kid from the Jersey Shore that I looked at. And I remember being on the ibogaine and looking at that kid. And that's kind of what the medicine returned me to. It knocked off, 45 years of just freaking everything and showed me underneath that this little kid, before all the trauma happened, and it showed me to look at the world with a new, set of eyes. It really did scrub the fog off. So yeah, that's when I got home and I changed the name. I'm like, Top Gun Fighter Foundation sounds a little too aviation-ish. So, and Vets does a great job, but they only were helping Navy SEALs, and Heroic Heart, does a great job, but they only help combat veterans. I'm like, I ain't no combat vet, man. Mine was bullshit, and I want to help everybody heal. So we help veterans, first responders, and family members. So we're a bigger tent here because, kind of like we talked about, some people might not even been near combat and military sexual trauma or other stuff going on. They deserve to heal too. So we're a bigger tent at No Fallen Heroes. I still love my other sister squadrons, but we're a little bit more, especially the family members, man. Gold Star parents or
That's
spouses, they
incredible.
serve too, man. They made
Yep.
the ultimate sacrifice, and we're gonna help them heal as well. So I'm so excited with this mission. I'm proud of you and what you're doing to put the ladder down to help your first responder brothers and sisters and everybody heal. I keep, that's the drum I want to pound is, the first psychedelic renaissance, probably a little bit too far. Timothy O'Leary, let's put it in the water. Probably
Yeah.
probably scaring a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. A little before it's time.
This time around, I think God having some police officers or fighter pilots or SEALs kind of leading the way. Maybe mom and pop walking down the street and go, wow, well, if these guys and gals are doing this, maybe it's okay for us people too. So I think we got some good stuff coming,
Yeah, it's good that we're not soy boys, and it's funny. I've smoked weed in high school. I've never done another drug in my life. I am no flower
Gotcha.
child. When I first heard about these medicines, and it was through the Sean Ryan show, so I was listening, and I wasn't putting down on them because they were all hardened warriors. But I'm like, I don't think it's for me. And then after a while, I'm like, you know what? This is exactly what I need. And
Exactly.
listen, can you just talk a little bit more about if a man or woman wants to go through the No Fallen Heroes, what the
Yeah.
exact procedure is, how it works, what you guys do for them?
Yeah, you bet. Just go to, you can go to nofallenheroes.com. Up on the top right, it says contact us, and there's a grant request form. So if you can self-fund, that would be great. You go right to the top of the line, obviously. If you can't, we give partial grants, or we can give a full grant. So yeah, if you're a veteran, a first responder, or a family member of either of those two, we can hook you up. And it depends on, and like you and I talked about earlier, the medicine calls to you. It really depends on you. We don't steer anybody anywhere. The medicine's going to call to you, and that particular medicine is going to call to you. You did ayahuasca. I did ibogaine. We do psilocybin in Oregon and Colorado. There's toad. There's iboga potentially in Costa Rica. So we'll brief you on the medicine buffet, for lack of a better word, and your specific medicine's going to call to you. And there's, some of the psilocybin retreats are quicker. The ibogaine's a little longer because you do have a day and a half down, and it's a little bit more in depth. The places we do ibogaine at are full blown clinics, right? You do an EKG, you're hooked up to an EKG the whole night. There's a cardiologist there sleeping downstairs in case anything happens. There's 2 nurses. So, the ibogaine's a little bit more of an investment, so to
Right.
speak, than the psilocybin or maybe the toad or something like that. So
As
yeah,
far as
just
effectiveness, do you see one over the other working more effectively for people?
I to me, yes, but I don't speak to others like that because as
Right.
you're well aware, God is with you and has your program, right? Not I got exactly what I needed when I needed it. So I shy away from steering the medicines. I will say if people kind of tell me their stuff, I will give them a full brief on how each one I think could potentially help them. But man, I could be, I've seen people do psilocybin and completely get what I got from ibogaine. I've seen people do the whatever the protocol is, the 6 ketamine treatments, and they're healed for life. So it depends on the person. Because I tried ketamine so I could. Because people kept asking me about it. I'm like, well, I've never done it. I ain't going to tell anybody to do anything that I haven't
Right.
done. So I sat with it. And I'm like, wow, I can see how this is a good, bridge to potential deeper healing if needed, or it's a bridge to good healing for you. Because I remember before sitting with the ketamine, they're like, okay, so, in about 45 minutes, you can start to sit up. I'm like, wait, what? It took about an hour to 2 hours for the ibogaine to fully kick. I'm like, 45 minutes, we're going to be up and walking around. Are you insane? I got a day and a half booked, So all of these different healing modalities are different. And that's what's cool is God put these things on this planet for us to heal. And, first of all, they shouldn't be illegal because of that. But second of all, that shows me that God putting psilocybin or iboga or ayahuasca or toad on this planet there are different things that they do. So,
Right.
yeah, I recommend the second you say, you know what, I'm thinking about doing this, there are so many resources out there for you to get up to speed. You know, in the past 4 years since I sat with the medicine, it's like a hockey stick, man. The
Yeah.
information's going straight up, the knowledge, podcasts like yours. So it's only gonna get better. And I tell people there's two charts right now. This is the world and this is the United States. This is the rise of these medicines, man, and hopefully that this chart's going to hit that one before it's
Yep.
too late, you know.
No, I think I don't. I think it's just a wave of the future. I don't think there's any way of stopping it. I think
Exactly.
it is so effective that you're not going to be able to stop it. It's just going to be a runaway train, and
Yeah.
for
Well, I
good.
see, the Wall Street Journal has, stories on moms microdosing or executives or, it's once something, and this isn't a fad to your point. This ain't going to be a spike and go away.
No,
I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme. You go and heal, you come home and you tell 20 friends, because you want to put the ladder down and help others heal. I think you and I talked about this on our podcast. When you get on an airliner, man, one of the first things the flight attendant tells you is, if we lose pressurization and things are going bad, put the mask on who? You. You
yeah,
got to put the mask on you first. You ain't good to anybody else in your row if you're out. So you ain't good to your wife, your husband, or your kids until you put the mask on yourself first.
yeah,
So yeah, this isn't, this isn't a fad. And oh, by the way, folks, I know in the West we have these huge egos. Like, look at what we found. Man, you go into the middle of Gabon, you go into the middle of the Amazon. These people have been doing this for a couple thousand years.
exactly.
This ain't new. So
Nope.
us acting in the West, like, we need to put these things in a beaker and have people. I'm like, the lady in the Amazon, medicine woman in the Amazon ain't dealing with beakers and stuff like that. They're doing with knowledge and experience and wisdom. But I get it. In the West, test and dosage and all sorts of stuff. But man, when we did Iboga in Costa Rica, the medicine man felt spirit and dumped what spirit told him into our mouth. And I guarantee
Yeah.
the FDA ain't going to agree with that serving size. So I get it. We're going to have to, figure it out, but there ain't no stopping it, to your point.
No, and it's just like with ayahuasca. There's 80,000 vines in the Amazon forest, but you have to use these two vines or else it will not function.
Yep.
Who told whoever it was that made it the first time to use those two specific vines? You can't tell me that was no higher source.
Amen.
Universe, God, whatever power you want to use.
Yeah.
80,000, and he chose those two correctly.
Yeah. A good read if you really want to catch up on this stuff is it's called The Immortality Key. So early Christianity is based on psychedelics, man. Brian Murescu, he's on Joe Rogan. Yeah, watch his videos. He's on Joe Rogan. He and Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan dig into early Christianity. The Greeks went to Eleusis. They did an annual pilgrimage to a city called Eleusis, and they drank psychedelics. The inscription above the place, it said, "Die before you die, and you will never die." That's kind of what psychedelics do. I told you with the toad, man. I died on the toad. Now that
Yep.
I've died, I'm living. I am more alive than I've ever been in my entire life because of this. So the history of psychedelics is it's been, this ain't the first rodeo, and it's certainly hopefully going to be the last, because the more people that use these are there's no way the world is not going to be a better place. And this ain't.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there going, "Oh, I see a lot of people on weed who are lazy," this ain't weed, man. This ain't anything. Matter of fact, I've seen people who use a lot of weed do ibogaine, never even look at weed again. It's going to give you a clean piece of paper, man. When you come home, my guide told me, and I think she was wrong with this. She said 5% is the medicine here, Whiz, because the next day I'm running around, I'm healed. She's like, 5% here, 95% the integration, what you do with it. I think she lied, because I think it's 1 in 99. I think 1% was the medicine. 99% of it is what you do when you get home. You got to put in the work. You have got to integrate. If you just come home and do nothing and you slide into your old habits, you're in trouble. But if you put in the work, and that's why at No Phone Hearings, you got 4 debriefs when you get home. We got group calls and coaching. I mean, you're clean. I think ibogaine, I think with psilocybin, it's 2 weeks, the window, the golden window, or whatever they call it. I think with ibogaine, it's the medicine with the longest open window. You have 4 weeks of neuroplasticity, of regrowing damaged or dead or new pathways, and also just a new system. So they say, hey, don't go home and try a glass of wine or something like that. Again, it took me 8 months. Now, if I choose to have a glass of wine with my steak or my pasta, I can. But old Whiz, a glass of wine was was 2. A glass of wine to Whiz was 2 bottles easily. Now I can choose to if I want. But old Whiz, man, I would have been swinging from the chandelier and breaking shit. So that golden window is absolutely critical. So if this is calling to you, know that this is a mission, man. We treat it like a combat mission. You go in with 5 intentions. You go in with 5 questions. We debrief. This is some serious shit. And I know we're getting close here, but let me say this: if this resonated with you, great. But listen to me. Radical trauma might need radical healing. There are so many different healing modalities. I found hot yoga, then I found meditation, and then I found the medicine. But any one of those, meditation, breath work, or climbing a mountain in Nepal, knitting, skiing. There are so many different healing modalities. This is one of them. But if you need kind of a bigger of an ass kick than some of those healing modalities, this should call to you. So God is pretty smart, because that was my path. When I was spiraling the drain, a friend's like, dude, you should go try some hot yoga. I'm like, dude, if I saw me doing a downward dog, I would literally beat the shit out of me. And there I was. I thought I was a badass too, right? I've worked out with SEALs. I can throw some iron around. I'm a fighter pilot. Man, at the 31-minute point of a 60-minute hot yoga session in Fort Lauderdale, I thought I died. I was done.
No joke.
It is no joke. So I found hot yoga, and then I became friends with one of the instructors, and she's like, well, you meditate, right? I'm like, I can't sit still for 30 seconds. What are you talking about, meditation? I went to a meditation retreat and took a couple days, and I'm like, so it was a good potential path for people if you're interested, is because yoga links, breath work with movement, and you can breathe through some uncomfortable things, right? So it teaches you that. And then obviously the meditation is great to focus on being present and the breath. So those 2 things were kind of like a Reese's peanut butter cup to get me to the medicine. So being as prepared as you can for this medicine work only sets you up for success. And diet too. Like before you go on a retreat, stop drinking a week prior, no red meat. Each place has their own little protocol, but you're going to go into this thing as pure as you can, and also with some intentions. This is not, hey, do you want to go on a retreat in a week from now? Let's see how this goes. We're deadly serious about this work.
Oh, absolutely. And so people know, if you're taking SSRIs, antidepressants, you must wean off them slowly. You must be completely off them for approximately 30 days prior to drinking. So typically it's a 2-month process. You're going to wean off for the first month slowly, and you're going to be completely off for the second.
Exactly.
In addition, correct me if you know of any other conditions, but schizophrenics and bipolar are typically excluded from using these medicines.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Well, that's and I'm glad you brought this up, because if it bleeds, it leads, right? Because I guarantee you, if you Google some of the stuff, the fear porn is out there, like, oh, somebody died or this or that. I'm like, well, the places we go to, they do a drug and alcohol test when you show up. Because I think the most recent stat was like, in the past 3 decades, 30 people have been associated. But if you dig into the numbers, at the beginning of people trying to use ibogaine, there were heroin addicts who were showing up like, out in the parking lot, so we learn, unfortunately, from those type of mishaps. So any of the fear porn you're going to read, like, oh, there's reasons behind it. Right. But to your point, the medical, Doc Martine at the Mission Within, if you are on any of this stuff, do not do anything on your own. Work with the medical director. They'll talk to you about how to step down and everything like that. And then to your point, some potential, mind issues might exclude you, but we've had, Doc Martine or other medical directors have actually sat with that person and figured stuff out, and maybe they were misdiagnosed or they could do it. So It's not an automatic no, but just know some of these, schizophrenia or other type of issues, it could exasperate that condition. Right. So it's not an automatic no, but it's we definitely got to sit down and talk
look
to
much
you
closer.
First. Exactly. So I've actually heard, we haven't experienced, but I've, in the research I've heard is it's actually helped some of those people. It's your standard stuff.
Fantastic.
Somebody had that, they did it, and it went ape shit, and then now they've tarred everybody with it.
Yeah.
It's the idiot. You see on a car commercials the car doing something, and the bottom it's like professional driver on closed course. Clearly, somebody did something stupid and sued you for that, and now we all have to deal with this stupid shit.
Oh, exactly. The best one I love of those warnings are whatever medication they're advertising. If you're allergic to that medication, do not take. What? Obviously, if I am, I'm not. But how am I going to know prior to ingesting it? It's hysterical.
I love RFK though, man. He's like, I really never thought of it this way. I think intuitively I knew it, but I did know it. He's like, I'm no more big pharma commercials on TV. The only reason, because half the commercials, like you said, like you could die, you can kill others. The only reason big pharma advertises is because of the network. Like, the 6 o'clock news brought to you by Pfizer. They're not going to do the story on Pfizer being the worst thing that's ever happened. They're a sponsor of the show. They're taking checks. Exactly.
I actually just looked that up the other day. I'm like, why do they advertise? It's not like people are going to go in like, Doc, I saw this great medicine.
Yeah, I'm going to buy this medication.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, they have them in their pocket. Like, Pfizer spends $1 billion a year with us in advertising. So let's throttle back on the story. Good on them. Welcome to America, folks. But same thing. The light bulb went on. I'm like, now I get it. I've never seen a medication commercial and gone, wow, I'm going to buy that.
Exactly.
It's to lock that network down, dude, to not have them do anything.
Just learned something new today.
Yeah.
I know one thing was I just read, I think they're responsible for 20 or 25% of the entire advertising budget on TV. So that's how much they advertise. But I did not know that's the reason why.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I Googled it and it still didn't tell me that. So I'm glad
there's your problem right there was Google.
Exactly. I should know. Yep. Shame on me, Whiz. All right, listen, this has been an unbelievable podcast. Thank you so much for all the information. Please tell me how, I'll tell our listeners how they can reach you. Obviously, everything, all the links are going to be in the bio, but.
Yeah. Like I said, nofallenheroes.com. Or go to our Instagram is obviously No Fallen Heroes, LinkedIn, all that type of stuff. You can follow me on Instagram, official Whiz Buckley. Unfortunately, there's like 90,000 other accounts. My third largest group of followers is from Nigeria. So shout out to all my Nigerian, and Lagos is my third most followed city. So 2-3 times a week, dude, I get things from ladies like, you're supposed to marry me in Brazil tomorrow. Where are you? I'm like, oh my God, man. So official Whiz Buckley is me, and it's only me, fortunately or unfortunately. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. We, if you can throw a couple shekels over the fence to us, we need donate. That's our only limiting factor, man, is donations. We have a waiting list full of heroes, and thankfully the costs are coming down. It's a lot of money to send a vet, a first responder, or family member to Costa Rica or Mexico. It's about $6,500. Wow. In Oregon and Colorado, we're down to about $2,500, maybe $2,000-ish. So, but that's for psilocybin. So the costs are coming down, but healing's free. It should be free. But these retreat centers have mortgages and cooks and pay their facilitators.
Oh, so, absolutely.
And until it's literally free, we just need donations. And if you can't spare a couple shekels, at least maybe go on No Fallen Heroes and post our content, repost us, because awareness is really part of my mission too. I get messages almost every day on Instagram like, "Oh my God, I didn't know anything about this," and all the little individual light bulbs starting to go off. Man, we're really going to power some light and some change. So thanks for having me, bro, and good on you for putting the ladder down and starting your own healing Ponzi scheme. I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely, brother. You were definitely an inspiration. And listen, who knows where this road's going to lead either of us, but we're changing and saving lives. That's all I want to do.
Amen.
All right, brother. Again, thanks for everything. We will see you soon.
All right.
Whiz Buckley, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. See ya.